On the coldest night the city had seen in years, when the wind cut through coats like knives and the bus stop lights flickered as if even electricity was tired, Daniel stood shivering with his hands shoved deep into his pockets, counting the coins he had left and wondering whether to spend them on a bus ride home or a cup of cheap coffee to keep his hands from going numb. And that was when he noticed her, sitting on the icy bench at the far end of the bus stop, shoulders hunched, hair damp with melting snow, dress far too thin for the weather, knees pulled close to her chest as if she could fold herself smaller to escape the cold, and there was something about the way she stared straight ahead, not at her phone, not at the road, but at nothing at all, that made Daniel pause, because he had seen that look before in the mirror after his own life had quietly fallen apart. He told himself not to get involved, told himself he had enough problems, no job after the factory closed, rent overdue, pride already stripped down to the bone. But as another gust of wind swept through the stop and she visibly trembled, his body moved before his fear could stop it, and he shrugged off his jacket, the only decent thing he owned, the one his father had given him years ago, and stepped toward her, clearing his throat awkwardly as if kindness were a foreign language he wasn't fluent in. When he held the jacket out, she looked up slowly, eyes glassy but sharp, startled as if she hadn't expected anyone to see her at all, and for a moment she shook her head, murmuring that she was fine, that he shouldn't bother, but Daniel simply smiled and said, "You're freezing." "I can wait for the bus like this," a lie he was willing to tell because some lies were closer to truth than selfishness, and finally she accepted, wrapping the jacket around herself with trembling hands, letting out a breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. They sat there in silence as snow fell, cars hissed past on wet pavement, and the city continued its endless rush, unaware that two strangers were sharing a small, fragile moment of humanity, and after a while she whispered, "Thank you," her voice barely louder than the wind, and Daniel nodded, eyes fixed on the road, not wanting to embarrass her or himself by making it a bigger deal than it was, but she surprised him by asking his name, and when he told her, she repeated it softly as if committing it to memory, then introduced herself simply as Claire, no last name, no explanation, just Claire, and they talked, not about important things, not about who they were supposed to be, but about small things like how unreliable the buses had become, how winter always seemed longer when life was heavy, and how strange it was that a city so full of people could make you feel so invisible. When her bus arrived, she hesitated, standing slowly, handing the jacket back, but Daniel pushed it gently toward her and said she should keep it until she got where she was going, and for the first time that night, Claire smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, and said she would return it someday, a promise that sounded almost impossible given how the world usually worked, yet something in her tone made Daniel believe her, even as the bus doors closed and she disappeared into the blur of lights and snow, leaving him colder but strangely lighter than he had been all evening. Days passed, then weeks, and Daniel assumed that moment would fade into memory like everything else, until one afternoon he received a call about a job interview he didn't remember applying for, at a company so large and polished that he nearly didn't go, convinced there had been some mistake, and when he finally sat in the sleek boardroom, feeling painfully out of place in his worn shoes and borrowed confidence, the door opened and in walked Claire, no thin dress this time, no shivering, but a tailored suit, composed posture, and an authority that instantly silenced the room, and Daniel's heart dropped as embarrassment and confusion tangled together, his mind racing with apologies he thought he owed her for seeing her at her lowest. But before he could speak, she looked at him, recognition flashing across her face, followed by that same soft smile from the bus stop, and she introduced herself to the board as the CEO, calmly, confidently, as if worlds had never collided at all. Later, alone with him, she explained, not with excuses, but honesty, that she sometimes rode public transport to remind herself what real life felt like, that on that particular night a deal had collapsed, her phone had died, and she had wanted to sit with her failure without the armor of wealth or status, and that what stayed with her wasn't the cold or the humiliation, but the fact that a man with so little had given her the only warmth he had without asking for anything in return. Daniel listened, stunned, certain now that the interview was over before it began, but Claire surprised him again by telling him that skills could be taught, resumes could be rewritten, but character revealed itself when no one was watching, especially at a freezing bus stop, and she offered him not just a job, but a chance to rebuild, to believe that kindness still mattered in a world obsessed with taking. As Daniel walked out of the building with an offer letter in his hand, he realized that night had changed both of them in ways neither could have predicted, and that sometimes the smallest gestures carried the greatest weight, because they reminded us who we are when titles, money, and comfort are stripped away. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that compassion can still rewrite destinies, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because every story here is a reminder that one simple act of kindness can change a life, sometimes two, forever.